I want you to imagine just for a second that you're living your entire life inside this magnificent, really sprawling ancient estate.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Right, so it has these incredibly grand marble pillars, vaulted ceilings, huge heavy oak doors, and it feels completely undeniably solid. I mean, it's the kind of architecture that makes you feel safe. You feel oriented and just deeply grounded just by standing inside its walls.
Yeah, do you know where everything is?
Exactly. You know where the kitchen is, the bedrooms, you know exactly how the house operates. But then, one random Tuesday, you happen to look down at the floorboards.
And what happens?
You realize something that makes your stomach completely drop. The foundation of this massive estate, it isn't there anymore.
Oh, wow.
It didn't just crack. It completely evaporated like 100 years ago. And you, your friends, your family, your entire society, you have all just been floating in midair, completely unaware that the ground holding you up has vanished.
It's like, it's that classic cartoon physics moment.
Yes. Well, E. Coyote.
Right, exactly. The character runs off the edge of the cliff, and their legs are still spinning in the air, but they don't actually start plummeting into the canyon until they look down. They don't fall until they realize there is absolutely nothing beneath their feet.
That feeling right there, that absolute stomach-dropping terror of finally looking down, that is exactly what we are exploring today. Welcome to the deep dive. We have a massive stack of sources today.
We really do. We've got dense philosophical texts, historical encyclopedia entries, some really fascinating modern cultural commentary.
And we are going on a mission to completely dismantle arguably the most famous, and I would say definitely the most misunderstood, three-word phrase in the history of philosophy. God is dead.
Yeah, it is a phrase that has just completely saturated our modern culture. I mean, you see it scrawled on subway walls, it's printed on edgy T-shirts, casually tossed around in dorm room debates.
Yeah, totally.
But our goal today is to peel back all of those superficial pop culture misinterpretations. We are looking directly at the profound and honestly the apocalyptic warning that the 19th century German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche was actually trying to deliver to Western civilization.
Because the ultimate irony of this entire topic is that when Nietzsche wrote the words, God is dead, he was not throwing a party.
No, not at all.
He wasn't, popping champagne to celebrate the grand victory of the scientific method or the triumph of atheism. He was actually ringing the loudest, most frantic alarm bell he possibly could for a coming psychological and cultural catastrophe.
He was basically a diagnostician. He was looking at a patient who felt perfectly healthy, and he's telling them they have a terminal illness.
Right. And we are going to explore the mechanics of what Nietzsche actually meant. But more importantly, we're going to explore how this deeply affects you, the listener, right now, today.
Exactly. We're going to trace how this single concept drives the sudden rise of modern existential dread, and how it forms the hidden moral architecture behind almost every current political and social debate you see on your timeline today.
So let's just jump right in. We need to start by looking at the exact moment this phrase hit the public consciousness. Looking at our text, this traces back to Nietzsche's 1882 book, The Gay Science.
Right, specifically aphorism number 125.
The madman.
Yes, the madman. And the imagery Nietzsche paints here is incredibly striking. He describes a madman who lights a lantern, but, and this is key, he does it in the bright morning hours.
Which is already unsettling.
Yeah, and he runs into the center of a bustling marketplace, and he just starts crying out incessantly, I seek God, I seek God.
And we really need to pause here and analyze the specific audience Nietzsche places in this marketplace, because this is the crucial twist from the sources.
What's fascinating here is the people this madman is shouting at. They're not pious religious clerics. He hasn't barged into a cathedral.
Or a monastery, right?
Right. He is standing in a secular marketplace, completely surrounded by a crowd of atheists. These are modern secular unbelievers.
And their reaction is vital to the story. They don't get angry. They mock him.
They just laugh at him.
Yeah, they ask him condescending questions like, has he got lost? Did he lose his way like a child? Is God hiding? Has he gone on a voyage?
They treat him like a street performer who has just completely lost his mind. But then the madman jumps right into the middle of the crowd, pierces them with his eyes, and delivers the lines that altered philosophy forever.
He says, whither is God? I will tell you. God is dead. God remains dead. And we have killed him.
It gives you chills.
It does. Okay, let's unpack this, though. I have a fundamental question about the mechanics of this scene. If the people in the marketplace are already atheists, why is the madman calling them murderers?
Right, that's the big question.
I mean, they don't believe in God anyway, so why would they care that God is dead?
To understand that, we have to look at the historical context of the late 19th century. By the time Nietzsche is writing this in 1882, atheism was not some cutting-edge, revolutionary, dangerous stance.
Sure, I mean, Darwin's On the Origin of Species had already been published decades earlier.
Exactly. The scientific revolution had been chugging along for centuries. For the highly educated European modernist, atheism was just the standard default assumption. It was the fashionable intellect of the day.
So the madman's true antagonist in this parable is not the religious believer.
No. It is the smug, modern, highly educated unbeliever. The person who thinks they've simply outgrown religion like a childhood sweater.
Which connects to a really interesting piece of illustrative content from our sources. The texts compare this crowd to modern figures. Like, think about the new atheist movement, Richard Dawkins or Sam Harris.
Right.
People who view religion as just a mind virus. They act just like the mocking crowd in the marketplace. They think they've won the debate.
But Nietzsche is looking at that smug crowd and realizing they have entirely missed the catastrophic nature of what they've done. When he says God is dead, he's not just signing a literal death certificate for a Christian deity.
Right.
He is stating that the entire concept of a universal transcendent truth has been destroyed. Truth itself is dead.
So the concept of God in this context, it represents the absolute, undeniable foundation of all European morality.
Yes, it's the foundation of meaning and value. And the atheists in the marketplace think they can just discard the theology but keep all the nice, comforting moral rules that the theology provided.
Oh, man. It goes right back to that Jenga tower analogy we started with. The atheists have carefully pulled out the absolute bottom foundational block of the Jenga tower, the belief in a divine creator who dictates objective good and evil.
And they're laughing because it hasn't fallen yet?
Exactly. They are pointing and laughing at the madman because the tower hasn't crashed at the table yet. They don't realize their entire worldview is about to collapse. All their ideas about human rights, justice, equality, what is fundamentally good and bad.
It was all built entirely on the specific God they just destroyed. That is the exact delusion Nietzsche is trying to shatter. You cannot remove the foundation and expect the house to remain hovering in midair indefinitely.
So they're basically operating on the moral fumes of Christianity.
That's a great way to put it. They have killed God, but they just haven't paid the bill for the murder yet. They've cast out epistemic certainty, the guarantee that anything is objectively true, without realizing the horrific psychological vacuum that creates.
And you can really feel that vacuum in the text itself. I mean, the sources point out how it reads almost like cosmic horror.
It really does.
The madman asks the crowd, is there still any up or down? Are we not straying as through an infinite nothing? Has it not become colder? I mean, mechanically, what happens to a human psyche when you realize there is no objective up or down?
Well, think about it from the perspective of your own daily life as a listener. Every decision you make, from the mundane to the profound, it's usually guided by some internal compass of what you believe is right or valuable.
Sure.
When the ultimate authority that guarantees that compass is erased from the universe, you are left in a devouring vacuum. You don't just lose the afterlife, you lose the justification for your present life.
That is terrifying.
And the madman realizes that the sheer weight of this deed, murdering the source of all value, it's just too heavy for normal humans to bear. He asks the crowd, must we ourselves not become gods simply to appear worthy of it?
Wait, so if the ultimate judge is gone, we have to become the judges?
Precisely. But the crowd doesn't understand. They just stare at him in total astonishment. And the madman finally smashes his lantern on the ground and says, I have come too soon. This tremendous event is still on its way.
Lightning and thunder require time.
Right. He says, the light of the stars requires time. Deeds, though done, still require time to be seen and heard. The deed is done, but the shockwave hasn't hit them yet.
It's just such a terrifying prophecy. But, transitioning here, what was really surprising in the source material is that this grand realization didn't just pop into Nietzsche's head out of nowhere.
Not at all.
To understand how God died, we actually have to look at the murder weapon. And surprisingly, Nietzsche wasn't even the first one to report the crime.
Right. If we trace the historical lineage of the phrase, it wasn't invented by Nietzsche. It actually goes back to 17th century Lutheran theories of atonement.
Wait, really? A Lutheran theory?
Yeah. We find it in a 1641 hymn written by Johann von Rist. The hymn is called O Traurigkeit, and it contains the literal lyric, God himself lies dead.
Okay, let's unpack this, because how does a pious Christian hymn end up providing the exact phrasing for the ultimate atheist rallying cry?
Well, in the context of the hymn, it referred specifically to the physical crucifixion of Jesus Christ. It was a theological meditation on the literal death of the physical incarnation of God on the cross.
Oh, I see.
It was meant to evoke deep sorrow. But ideas have a tendency to mutate. Over the next 2 centuries, that highly specific theological phrase began to detach from its religious roots. It started seeping into secular literature.
The sources show it popping up everywhere. It's almost like a literary virus.
Exactly.
Like in 1854, the French poet Gérard de Nerval wrote a poem using the phrase. Victor Hugo used it in Les Miserables in 1862.
And Jean-Paul's novel.
Yes, the German writer Jean-Paul. In 1797, he wrote a novel called Siebenkäse, which features this incredibly dark dream vision. In the dream, a dead Christ awakens in the cosmos, looks out at the universe, and proclaims to the terrified dead that there is no God.
A very striking image. And that literary dread eventually crystallized into hard philosophy. By the 19th century, German philosophers were actively secularizing the concept.
Like Hegel.
Right, Hegel wrote about the infinite pain of knowing that God is dead. For him, it wasn't just the crucifixion, it was the modern consciousness, realizing that the infinite realm could sink into an abyss of nothingness.
And then the sources mention Max Stirner in 1844. He wrote that man killed God simply to become the sole God on high.
Yes. Stirner recognized that the modern human hadn't actually abandoned the structure of religion. They just swapped out the deity for themselves. They elevated human reason to divine status.
We just promoted ourselves to middle management of the universe.
Exactly. But out of all these precursors, the philosopher who seems to have had the most direct influence on Nietzsche was a man named Philip Mainlander.
Okay, I really want to talk about Mainlander, because his theory is wild.
It is deeply pessimistic. Mainlander argued that God did exist as a basic cosmic unity at the beginning of time. But this God looked out at the prospect of existing forever and basically chose not to.
He argued that God committed suicide.
Right. Mainlander says that this singular God shattered himself into a multiplicity of struggling individual wills. So the entire physical universe, every star, planet, plant, animal, human, it's essentially the fragmented debris of a dead God.
He literally wrote, God has died and his death was the life of the world. It's almost like a spiritual Big Bang theory.
That's a perfect way to conceptualize it.
A singular divine entity explodes to create the chaotic, fragmented universe we live in. We are all just the shrapnel flying outward.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it shows how this historical timeline proves that the death of God wasn't a sudden assassination by Nietzsche. It was a slow decay of absolute certainty brought on by the Enlightenment, science, and rationality.
But wait, this brings up a huge contradiction. If science and rationality killed God and freed humanity from dogma, why did Nietzsche eventually turn his philosophical crosshairs on science itself? You'd think he'd be the biggest fan of science ever.
You would assume that, right? He initially admired science, but as his philosophy matured, particularly in his work on the genealogy of morality, he realized science was falling into the exact same psychological trap as religion.
Okay, so what does this all mean? When we say Nietzsche attacked science, is he saying germ theory is fake? Is he anti-technology?
Not at all. He respected the scientific method. What he violently rejected was scientism.
Scientism?
Right. Scientism is the ideologizing of science. It's treating the scientific pursuit of objective facts as a new, unquestionable religion. And to understand this, we have to look at a concept Nietzsche coined called the ascetic ideal.
Okay, an ascetic is usually someone like a monk, right? Someone who denies themselves physical pleasures, they fast, they live in poverty to achieve spiritual purity.
Exactly. The core mechanism of the ascetic ideal is the belief that this physical, messy, earthly world we live in is somehow flawed or illusory. Religion operates on this ideal by promising a perfect, pure realm called heaven.
But science doesn't promise heaven. Science studies this physical world.
Science doesn't promise heaven, but Nietzsche argues it promises something structurally identical. Pure objective truth, with a capital T. Science claims that behind the subjective emotional human experience, there are objective things in themselves. And science demands that we sacrifice our comfort, our myths, our illusions, all in the pursuit of this objective truth.
So the scientists laughing at the madman in the marketplace, they think they are the opposite of religious monks. But Nietzsche is saying they're just a new breed of monk.
Precisely. They've just replaced the altar of God with the altar of objective truth. They share the exact same metaphysical faith, the unshakable belief that truth is divine.
So are we supposed to stop valuing truth? I mean, untruth is a lie, and lies are bad, right? That seems like a pretty basic rule for a functioning society.
It feels that way because we are deeply conditioned by the ascetic ideal. But in Beyond Good and Evil, Nietzsche suggests we should question the actual value of truth. He points out that human life relies heavily on untruth to function. Art, illusions, polite fictions that keep families together.
Okay, let's bring this down to earth for the listener. Think about the modern obsession with being factually correct in arguments online.
Oh, yes.
We all know someone who will argue a pedantic fact until they are blue in the face, completely destroying their relationships and their mental health, just to prove they have the objective truth on their side.
And Nietzsche is asking, is your obsession with the truth actually helping you live a healthier, more vibrant life? Or is it anti-life?
Wow.
He proposes we should judge our beliefs not by whether they are objectively true, but by whether they are life-promoting and life-preserving.
That is a massive paradigm shift. Because when you lose that divine truth and realize even science can't provide absolute moral meaning, you stare directly into the terrifying void Nietzsche warned us about. Which brings us to segment 4, nihilism.
Right, the big scary N-word of philosophy. The word nihilism comes from the Latin nihil, which simply means nothing. At its core, it's the belief that all values are baseless and life is completely meaningless.
And the sources show this term actually gained massive popularity in 19th century Russia, right?
Yes, through literature. Specifically, Ivan Turgenev's novel Fathers and Sons, which features a character named Bazarov, who proudly identifies as a nihilist.
But it wasn't just a book thing, it was a real political movement.
It was. The Russian revolutionary movement, led by Mikhail Bakunin. He famously believed that the passion for destruction was a creative passion. They wanted to literally bomb the corrupt state and church into oblivion.
That's political nihilism. But the sources outline a few forms, right? Epistemological, ethical.
But the form Nietzsche was most concerned with is existential nihilism. The creeping dread that existence itself is entirely empty of cosmic purpose.
And how do people react to that? The texts outline 2 major pathways. First, passive nihilism, which is associated with Arthur Schopenhauer.
Yes. Schopenhauer looked at the meaningless suffering of the world and basically said, the only rational response is to give up. It's a philosophy of pessimism and compassion that paralyzes the will to live.
And Nietzsche hated that.
He utterly rejected it. Nietzsche wanted active nihilism. He wanted us to acknowledge the emptiness and actively destroy the old, baseless values so we could clear the ground to build new ones.
Here's where it gets really interesting, tying it back to the listener. The sources point to the massive rise of intensely cynical, misanthropic entertainment in pop culture today. Shows like Rick and Morty, Black Mirror, BoJack Horseman.
These shows reflect a society grappling with the exact meaninglessness Nietzsche predicted. We use irony as a shield.
And if we don't overcome it, Nietzsche says we devolve into something he calls the last man. This is from Thus Spoke Zarathustra. And honestly, the last man sounds exactly like a modern couch potato scrolling through social media.
It really does. The last man is the ultimate embodiment of passive, comfortable apathy. They've abandoned any desire for greatness or struggle.
Nietzsche wrote that they take a little poison for pleasant dreams. They work only for entertainment. They avoid exhaustion. And the most chilling detail, they proudly declare, we have discovered happiness, and then they just blink blankly at the world.
It's a state of absolute stagnation. Nietzsche warns that if we don't overcome the death of God, we are destined to become this herd, burying our existential angst under endless, meaningless entertainment.
But why are we so drawn to that apathy? To understand our current psychological programming, the sources say we have to look at the history of how we define good and evil in the first place, which brings us to the genealogy of morals.
This is arguably Nietzsche's most controversial work. He argues that throughout history, there have been 2 opposed types of morality battling for dominance: master morality and slave morality.
Okay, let's define these carefully. Master morality. This is the morality of the strong-willed, the noble, the independent. How does a master define what is good?
In master morality, good originates from self-affirmation. The strong look at their power, pride, and strength and declare, these traits are good because they are mine. So good equals powerful and life-affirming.
And what about bad? Does bad mean evil?
No, crucial distinction. Bad simply means weak, common, or pathetic. The master doesn't hate the weak, he just ignores or pities them.
Okay, so then we have slave morality, which originates from the weak and oppressed.
Right. Slave morality doesn't begin with self-affirmation. It begins with a reaction. The weak suffer under the masters. So their foundational concept is evil. And evil is defined by looking at the masters and labeling all their strength and pride as wicked.
So they invert it. Once the master's traits are evil, the slave rebrands their own weakness as a virtue. Impotence becomes patience, submission becomes obedience. Good equals sympathy, kindness, humility, and equality.
Exactly. And the mechanism they used to overthrow the masters was a psychological weapon called resentment.
Resentment, a deep-seated bitterness and envy.
Yes. The weak couldn't physically overpower the strong, so they engaged in psychological revenge. They waged a spiritual campaign that poisoned the conscience of the strong, convincing them their strength was a sin.
Now, I want to take a strict pause here and explicitly address you, the listener. The source material points to modern equivalents of slave morality today, things like virtue signaling or extreme egalitarianism. But to be unequivocally clear, we're not taking a political side here, left or right.
No, absolutely not.
We are impartially reporting Nietzsche's philosophical framework and how modern commentators apply it to today's society, allowing you to judge the merit of these connections yourself.
This raises an important question, though. If our current values of pity and altruism are just leftover mechanisms of historical revenge, what happens when the religious foundation holding them up is removed?
The whole structure collapses. It's like finding out the rules to a game you've been playing your whole life were actually written by the losing team just so they wouldn't feel bad about losing. What do you do when you realize the rules aren't real?
You rewrite the rules.
Yeah.
You become the creator of your own values. And that brings us to Nietzsche's ultimate vision for humanity's future, the Übermensch.
The Übermensch. We need to do some translation work here. Thomas Common translated it as Superman, borrowing from George Bernard Shaw. But Walter Kaufmann preferred Overman.
Kaufman wanted to distance it from comic books, obviously. The Overman captures the core action, overcoming. It's the goal humanity must set for itself, a shift from otherworldly values to deeply grounded earthly ideals.
This worldly...
Exactly. Nietzsche despised the Christian idea of an immortal soul separate from the body. He saw it as a mortification of the physical self. The Übermensch loves this physical world.
And they are driven by the will to power. Which, again, let's clarify, it's not brute physical force or dominating others, right?
Right. It's the drive for self-overcoming, creation, psychological mastery over one's own instincts.
And how do you test if you've achieved that? Nietzsche presents this mind-bending thought experiment, the eternal recurrence.
This is my favorite part.
If you had to live your exact life over and over again for eternity, every pain, every joy, exactly the same, would you be crushed by despair? Or would you say yes?
The Übermensch embraces amor fati, the love of fate. They would gladly say yes to living every second of it eternally.
Now, we have to solemnly address the dark historical hijacking of this term, because the sources detail how the Nazis twisted the Übermensch into a biological racial master race.
It is a profound tragedy. Nietzsche suffered a mental collapse in 1889. His sister, Elizabeth, took control of his unpublished writings, and she was married to a virulent German nationalist and anti-Semite.
She manipulated his texts to fit her husband's worldview.
She did, and decades later, the Nazis seized on these forged texts. But Nietzsche's actual views were the exact opposite. He loathed German nationalism. He despised anti-Semites, famously saying he would have them all shot. He ironically claimed to be a Polish nobleman just despite German nationalists.
And the sources also point out that the Übermensch greatly influenced anarchists like Emma Goldman and Spanish syndicalists. They saw it as a call for creative individuals free from the herd, neither master nor slave.
Exactly.
So, roughly 130 years after Nietzsche warned us, did we create the Übermensch, or did we just sink into the abyss? Let's look at the 20th century fallout.
It seems like we did a lot of sinking. Oswald Spengler wrote The Decline of the West in 1926, arguing Western culture was in fatal decay due to nihilism.
And then, in the 1940s and 50s, the French existentialist movement, Sartre and Camus.
Sartre gave us existence precedes essence.
What does that mean mechanically? The paper knife analogy from the sources.
Right. Before a paper knife is made, its essence, its blueprint, exists in the craftsman's mind. Humans used to think God was our craftsman. But without God, you physically exist first, in a random universe. You have to invent your own essence through your choices.
And Camus called this collision between our desire for meaning and a cold universe the absurd, like the myth of Sisyphus pushing the boulder up the hill forever.
Camus struggled to find meaning. You see the bleakness in The Stranger, Caligula, The Plague. It's a defiant philosophy, but exhausting.
But then Heidegger offered a different perspective. He said the death of God is the end of metaphysics.
Yes. Heidegger thought Nietzsche's will to power was just another human-centered attempt to dictate reality. Heidegger suggested we simply let being be. Stop forcing the universe to mean something.
But moving to the modern day, the sources discuss anti-foundationalism and postmodernism. Lyotard, Derrida, Rorty. I look this as a shift from existential screaming into the void to just shrugging at it.
Shrugging is the perfect physical embodiment. Postmodernists have an incredulity toward meta-narratives. They dismiss all grand stories of progress or salvation. They argue truth is just constructed by language and power dynamics.
And the scholar Karen Carr calls this the banalization of nihilism, a cheerful nihilism where meaninglessness is just accepted with mild annoyance.
But the danger, as the sources warn, is that when all perspectives are seen as equally meaningless, raw power and intellectual arrogance take over.
Which connects directly to our current post-truth era. The muddier waters of the epistemic commons where shared objective standards for truth have disappeared entirely. We are literally living in the madman's marketplace.
We really are.
Wow. We have covered an epic journey today. From a madman in a marketplace realizing the foundation of Western morality had vanished, to the looming threat of the last man. We unpacked the controversial genealogy of our morals and Nietzsche's ultimate challenge to become the creators of our own values, the Übermensch.
And bringing it directly back to you, the listener, what is your mechanism for creating value? Are you staring at the signpost of modernity, passively slipping into the comfort of the last man? Or are you striving to find meaning in the suffering of life?
We want to leave you with a final, provocative thought inspired by the sources. If Nietzsche believed that the shadow of God would linger in caves for thousands of years, what modern secular institutions, political ideologies, or even technological pursuits are secretly just the shadow of God in disguise today?
What is offering you a false absolute truth so you don't have to face the terrifying freedom of the open sea?
Think about that Jenga tower. Look down. Are you going to fall or are you going to fly? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive and keep questioning everything.